Shalom. Welcome to Hayom. I'm Rabbi Arnold Rachlis. Have you ever wondered what makes Jewish humor Jewish and humorous? Our guest today is Joe Zoller, who's a marketing executive. He has his own organization, the Zoller organization, and he teaches at one of the suburban Chicago synagogues a course in Jewish humor. He's going to talk to us about the Jewish influence on American humor and a lot of other things, and we're very glad to have you with us,
Thank
Joe.
you.
Let me ask you, what makes Jewish humor Jewish humor? What's specifically Jewish about Jewish humor?
Well, to a large extent, Jewish humor is that which is labeled Jewish humor. The same way that someone might say, why is a lawyer a Jewish lawyer or a Jewish doctor? We put a label on it, but there's no doubt that we have a lot of Jews, in fact, a disproportionate number of Jewish comedians, humorists, comedy writers, comedic actors or singers, ever since about the turn of the century, who have performed, and it has been generally accepted that the comedy or humor industry, if you want to call that, in this country has been dominated by Jews, and this has been something that has been generally accepted.
Well, there's an article that was written about you in a local magazine, and it described what you consider the quintessential Jewish joke. A mother buys her son 2 neckties for his birthday. A week later, the son shows up wearing one of the ties, and the mother says, "So what's the matter with the other tie?" What makes that quintessentially Jewish?
It really is the quandary, the question, the ambivalence. It was attributed as being quintessentially Jewish, and it probably falls within the repertoire of all kinds of Jewish comedians. The thing that makes it Jewish is that it is a situation that probably anybody can relate to, and that is one of the unique aspects of Jewish humor, is that if you're going to make any common premise about humor that would be classified as Jewish humor, other than putting on a Jewish dialect or using Jewish phrases, it's the universality of the humor.
Though part of the punch of that joke is guilt, Jewish mother. Why do women get, especially mothers, why do Jewish mothers get such a bum rap in Jewish humor?
I don't know if they get a bum rap. There's certainly a lot of there are a lot of stories about Jewish mothers that tend to be humorous, but they also tend to be with affection. I think it has a lot to do with the role of the Jewish mother in Jewish life. You find very often the Jewish mother is the person who is the dominant personality in the household, particularly in the early days of the century, when the father may have been out of the house working several jobs, or leaving early, coming in late. The Jewish tradition of the father being the scholar, the mother's traditional role as a homemaker, so that I think it was natural that the mother became not only an object but also a source of the humor, because it was a familiar person.
Do you think it was affectionate and loving rather than threatening and overbearing?
Yes, I think the familiarity was probably the predominant reason, although there are definitely situations where the mother is overbearing and threatening, and to the extent that those characteristics are there, the Jewish humorist took advantage of them to make humor that everybody could understand.
What about materialism? That also figures in Jewish humor. Sometimes we're embarrassed by our materialism, sometimes we flaunt our materialism. How has that changed in the course of American Jewish humor, and why is it so central?
Well, I think what we're talking about is a lot of the story of like the bar mitzvah safari, and for anybody who has not heard the story, which has gone around, it basically talks about a husband and wife relating about how one's partner has had this tremendous affair for their son's bar mitzvah, and now what are they going to do to top the partner? And they call in a bar mitzvah consultant, and the bar mitzvah consultant talks about everything from renting out the Orange Bowl to the Radio City Music Hall with the Rockettes, and then they finally have something that is going to be truly unique, and that is they'll fly the entire bar mitzvah party to Africa, and they'll have a bar mitzvah safari, and the thing is set up, and there's a delay, and the father, the bar mitzvah boy, with all the guests, asks, "What's the delay?" to the tour guide, and the tour guide says, "Well, you'll have to wait because there are 2 more bar mitzvah safaris ahead of them." That probably is about as much excess in terms of materialism, and I think that's the kind of materialism you were talking about. Those stories developed in the late 40s and the early 50s, and they tended to be in a period when Jews as a group were finally achieving a role in middle-class society. They were achieving more than just a subsistence existence. They had additional funds. They were able to now partake of what they perceived as the good life, and they wanted to demonstrate that they have now moved themselves one rung up the ladder. So anywhere that somebody could demonstrate that they had achieved this higher level of economic standing, they wanted to demonstrate it, and whether it was a mink coat or the fantastic wedding or the bar mitzvah, whatever the materialistic excess was a central theme, and because of that, and because of the familiarity of it, it became rich fodder for all kinds of comedians.
Is there a difference when a Jew tells a Jewish joke about materialism or whatever, and when a non-Jew tells the same joke? Is one joke a bit, I don't want to call it anti-Semitic, but it has some anti-Semitic overtones?
I think it's true with almost any ethnic group who can tell a story about their own foibles or their own characteristics, and it can be done with affection, and people are talking about a truth that they recognize, even though it's exaggerated, and it usually is done with affection. And as long as it's in the confines of the community that is part of the butt of the humor, nobody gets offended. When it is used as a means of putting down another group, then it becomes offensive. Whether it's
but we have lots of comedians who appear in television, Jews as well as non-Jews, and if a Jewish comedian gets on the Tonight Show and he tells a joke that reflects, maybe perhaps honestly, but also a bit embarrassingly, on contemporary Jewish condition, is that different than if a non-Jewish comedian tells the same joke in front of America?
It's different, and it expresses 2 different things. If a non-Jew told a joke, in effect, describing this failing or excess, or however you want to describe it, it is taken as a derisive or derogatory comment, and I think it would get resentment as an emotional response.
So do you think that non-Jews shouldn't tell Jewish jokes, or that Jews shouldn't tell black jokes, or et cetera, et cetera?
I think that as a general rule that ethnic jokes, when somebody is the butt of them, whether it was the Irish jokes at the turn of the century or the common Polish jokes now, any of those are offensive to the group that is being portrayed in a negative sense. Unfortunately, we have gotten into that. In the early days of vaudeville, when humor was really just becoming something that was, or entertainment was becoming widespread, and vaudeville was a dominant part, ethnic humor was really a staple part of the kind of humor that traveled the circuits. There were, at that time on the bill, there would be black comedians who may or may not have been black. There were Italian comedians, there were German comedians, there were Jew comedians, and I use that.
They were called
Jew comedians, and the reason they used it is because at the time they needed something that, one, would draw in a large group of people, and also they needed quick stereotypes so people would get the jokes. There were no doubt that they were stereotypes, and these were almost roles that played the bill on any vaudeville routine, and not necessarily played by someone of the ethnic group that they portrayed. Groucho Marx related that when he started out, he was a German comedian. And when the Lusitania was sunk, it was not very funny to be a German comedian, so he changed his routine and became, in his words, a Jew comedian. Even into relatively recent times, someone who wasn't Jewish but played a Jewish comedian, in fact had an act that was almost 90% Yiddish punchlines, was Danny Thomas. Danny Thomas, all the way from the early days in the 40s, he started in Detroit and then worked at what was known as the 5100 Club in Chicago, and then even up to the Ed Sullivan program, would pepper his routine with Jewish punchlines and Yiddish dialect. And
well, in fact, he was the only non-Jew ever to star in The Jazz Singer, right?
That's right.
The second version of it.
And because he had probably one of the best Yiddish dialects of almost anybody that was of that age group that was around.
Let me ask you about different Jewish comedians. Right?
Okay.
There's let's say a Myron Cohen who very much uses the immigrant accent and style. There's a Jack Benny who is more assimilationist, and then there's sort of a post-assimilationist David Brenner. Right?
Right.
Can you tell us about what in American life has made those comedians emerge in those styles?
Myron Cohen is a storyteller, and he always admits, if you've ever heard his routine, he'll always say, here is a story that was told to me by somebody who stopped me on the street or a friend of his, and he will, between his stories, he has beautiful diction, a very cultured voice, and very quickly kind of works himself into a Yiddish or Lower East Side or immigrant type of accent to tell a story and to kind of clothe the story in a Jewish aura. The story, maybe if told by an Irish dialectician, could have been told with just slight modifications, but the point is that he tells the story beautifully, and he's a master in terms of timing. I like to think of Myron Cohen in the same sense as a Itzhak Perlman. The difference is that Myron Cohen, instead of playing the violin, plays the mainza, which is he knows how to play a story, and he can absolutely put it in the proper perspective so that anybody can enjoy it. It's Jewish because he's made it Jewish, and he embellishes it in terms of the Jewishness of it. But the humor itself can be enjoyed by almost anybody in the country, and it's a friendly kind of humor, and it's the kind of a story that in many cases you had earlier referred to, can a non-Jew tell a story? Most of Myron Cohen's stories if the repeated is, this is the story that Myron Cohn told, they can do that. And he will pick up very specific things that are.
But he seems to enjoy the Jewishness of his stories.
Correct.
Where Jack Benny was sort of a par of Jewish comedian.
That's
I mean,
right.
You didn't, the Jewishness didn't show.
Jack Benny developed as a. He had a lot of the characteristics of the Jewish comedians, but he never used in his role as Jack Benny on his radio and TV programs later. He never was Jack Benny, the Jewish comedian. He was Jack Benny, all-American tightwad. If you see reruns of old Jack Benny programs on TV, or ever listen to old Jack Benny radio programs, or if your memory is good enough to remember that, Jack Benny always had a Christmas show. He always had an Easter show. Is with the staff, and was almost a denominational situation, and there was no reference to the fact that Jack Benny was Jewish. In fact, Jack Benny was all-American. He was totally assimilated, as you said. Although in his personal life he made no hiding of the fact that he was Jewish, and there never was any attempt to disguise that. But as his show went, he was trying to reach the broad USA market. Now, he carried over the concept of the Jewish comedian, the ethnic character, into his radio program, because he used a character called Mr. Kitzel. There were several programs that used Jewish or Yiddish characters. Fred Allen used a Mrs. Nussbaum, and the Mr. Kitzel character also appeared on different radio programs. But one of the interesting things that I found was that Jack Benny always treated Mr. Kitzel very affectionately and very warmly, so that no matter what the situation was, Mr. Kitzel was not put down. He always was. He's such a nice man.
That maybe that was the way you're saying that Jack Benny manifested his self-pride through the affectionate, even if a bit bumbling Mr. Kitzel.
He pulled Mr. Kitzel as a readily identifiable, although never spoken, but there was no doubt that he was intended as a Jewish character, and elevated him in terms of his caricature.
Okay, now somebody like David Brenner or any of the young Jewish comedians, if it comes out in the midst of a joke, if the punchline, if a Yiddish word or a Jewish nuance or some self-reflective statement about being Jewish comes out, it comes out.
It's very
but
unself-conscious.
It's not dwelled upon in any
That's
way.
right. He doesn't milk it, and he doesn't apologize for it, and it's just it's almost like the Americanization of Yiddish. Leo Rosten talks about Yinglish, and I think anybody who grows up in a large city, and David Brenner grew up in Philadelphia and now considers himself a New Yorker, a lot of these things, it's difficult to determine how much of it was Jewish heritage and how much was big city heritage. But he does not have the self-consciousness of entertainers. I mean, the whole entertainment industry in the 30s and 40s to be Main Street USA as the Jack Benny program.
Do you think we'll ever have Jewish comedians of the old type again who dwell on their Jewishness? Or because I think when I think of who dwells on their own ethnicity, it's black comedians, Hispanic comedians. It's those who are emerging into the middle class. So are the days gone of real Jewish humor? Will there never be a Shalom Aleichem on contemporary American soil?
I think that I wouldn't say that there'll never be, but the odds of having this fertile breeding ground like we had at the turn of the century and through the middle 30s that developed so many great comedic minds out of the Jewish population, that is disappearing. The need and the drive that pushed that developed Jewish comedians, I think, is diminishing, so that you're not going to see the number of Jewish comedians, and like you mentioned, the emerging populations groups Hispanics, blacks, it may be Vietnamese or Korean. As each group assumes a role in society, will develop comedians who will take advantage of the fact that there are certain new areas that they could make fun of. If they dwell in the same way, if Jewish comedians dwell just on the fact that they're Jewish, they have a very limited scope. There have always been Jewish comedians who made a career of doing strictly Jewish material. It could not be understood by people that were not Jewish. And I'm not talking about Yiddish language. I'm talking about Jewish comedians who took all their laughs based on something Jewish, and their audience was very limited. The ones that have been successful have been able to reach a universal area. They've been able to look at a situation in a way that is recognizable by anybody. Regardless if they've experienced the identical situation, they can now see something, see the situation, and see the humor in it.
Well, you know, you're saying, though, that a lot of comedy comes out of powerlessness, marginality. When you're an immigrant trying to break in, you can think funny. As we become more acculturated and more comfortable and more affluent, et cetera, are we going to stop being funny?
No,
to anybody but ourselves?
I think we're going to keep thinking funny, because in my own studies, my own theory is that part of the reason that there are so many Jewish comedic minds is that we have a heritage of, goes back to Talmudic reasoning, it goes back to analyzing things from different directions. It's the fact that we never, everything was fair game to criticize. We weren't a restrained population in terms of who we could judge or criticize. So we would look at things from different angles. And if you look at things from enough different angles, you're going to see something that doesn't look right. It looks somewhat askew, and you're going to be able to see things that look funny to you, normal everyday occurrences. In the days growing up, we had an awful lot of short comedians that would use this ability that seemed to be available to all Jews, but use it as a defense mechanism. And so that they had to learn how to fight, and they became comedians. I think it was Mel Brooks that said that it's hard for someone to slug you when they're laughing. So that they used it as a defense mechanism. And as a people who were discriminated against, Jews used humor as a means of being loved, or at least an attempt at trying to be loved, to be accepted. I think the concept behind it was if people were laughing with you, or if they were laughing, period, we could be accepted.
One of your major areas of interest is the Jewish influence on American humor. Who represents that most now? Would it be Woody Allen? I mean, is he the one who has made America laugh at things, at nuances that only Jews used to laugh at? Or are there others?
Well, it's hard to say. Woody Allen is looking at it from a very specific point of view. I think he represents looking at things from the urban point of view. Mel Brooks certainly has been very prolific in terms of making America laugh. You mentioned David Brenner, and there's been a slew of other comedians that have come through in the past few years. In earlier years, we saw people like Mort Saul and Shelley Berman and Nichols and May, who virtually dominated. There was a whole group they called the New Comedians, and they personified the idea of looking at everyday things, and again, this universal aspect, the idea of being able to bring the audience into the same situation as the teller. And that, I think, was one of the key points that led to the success of the Jewish comedian, whether he was doing Jewish material or not.
There's such a vast difference between Mel Brooks and Woody Allen. I mean, you know, when I think of Mel Brooks, I think of sort of his paradigmatic scene being, you know, the cowboys around the campfire after they ate the beans. You know, I mean, that's sort of Mel Brooks' humor. I think of Woody Allen, I think of sort of angst, you know, urban anxiety and
we could go on and compare Woody Allen with Franz Kafka because
it seems very similar to sort of a paranoia to both of them.
And again, Woody Allen is using the concept of the incongruities. We're dealing with incongruities, and Woody Allen is fantastic in seeing relationships between things that we take for granted on a day-in, day-out basis, and all of a sudden he puts them into a juxtaposition that are totally absurd.
Is that because as a Jew he perceives himself to be somewhat of an outsider to society, so he can see society's foibles and their incongruities?
I think that has an influence on him, definitely. I think that's one of the things that that kind of situation we all find ourselves in. And the Jewish comedian has developed this kind of background area and fine-tuned it or honed it to a very sharp edge, and that's where Woody Allen has been very successful. Whether he's doing a stand-up monologue or he's trying to direct and do a movie, he is trying to communicate some of the inconsistencies and incongruities in life and things that we just take for granted.
But, you know, Woody Allen's been unsuccessful as of late with his films, don't you think? I mean, there was sort of a
commercially unsuccessful.
Commercially unsuccessful. Well, I think that, you know, in fact, that is fair to say, because they have become, in many ways, more interesting and more subtle. But what's happening? I mean, what kind of humor is he getting into that mainstream America isn't finding acceptable?
I think one thing, he's trying to expand himself beyond humor, so that everyone keeps going to see Annie Hall done another time, and which was a very funny movie, and particularly from a Jewish point of view, and as a Jewish male you could relate to Woody Allen's character. But
is he going for the universal? I mean, is that why?
No, I think he's now achieved the luxury of being able to try to express himself for the sake of expressing himself, I guess, which is one of the benefits.
I would love to have us express ourselves longer. We can't. We're running out of time. But Joe, I want to thank you very much for being with us and sharing your interest and study of comedy with us. Please tune in again. Join us for Hayom. Write to us at 1 South Franklin Street, Chicago, Illinois. See you soon in Hayom. Shalom.